Good Friday and Passover blessings to you, Modernism and the museum students. I hope this day finds you well. I hope that you've had a productive week and that you are looking forward to a time of spiritual renewal with your loved ones. Come to you from Fort Lauderdale. I had just returned from a week in Los Angeles and had some time also to go to uh, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art with my daughter and to think about the museum exhibition and the museum space as a public space. And one of the things I noticed, in particular in the context of this week's readings, the idea of the exhibition space and the museum as a public forum, as a cultural arena in which political and social and cultural discourses are participated in, acted out, and the messiness of modern democratic life is embodied in walking through the plaza of LACMA and the Broad Museum, the parks, the tar pits, places where people meet, and the idea, something that my staff, the museum I worked for, talked about a lot in terms of pooling audiences and finding places where they can gather and linger, so that the museum goer isn't just going for a single destination to see this exhibition or to see that work of art and then leaving, but coming into the area, spending time in the area, interacting socially in context. And I think the best construction of those extra artistic elements of museums, the bookshops, the cafes, the outdoor plazas that with the chairs and the tables, places where people can sit and talk, are truly important for the working out of the museum as an important public space. And it then is not surprising that, given the fact that the museum is a public venue and that the museum displays visual work, visual images that are often highly visually, politically, socially charged, that the museum space is a space in which those works of art are taken up and utilized in the polemic discourse of politics and other forms of social discourse. And so it's not surprising that from the very beginning of the museum, that it serves as a function of society. Somehow as a society, the museum audience is a microcosm of society, something we talked about in the first week of class, about the role that the annual salon played. That the salon, the museum exhibition, was really a unique place, a place where all the classes in Paris would come together. That the elites and the bourgeois and the lower classes, the working classes, all were fascinated by the visual arts and came to the museum or came to the exhibition space as a kind of visual and social spectacle. And so writing about those and writing reviews of those salon exhibitions in Paris from the 18th century or from the 17th century through the 19th century were opportunities for writers to use art to write about politics, to use art to write about society. And that's always been a part of modern artistic and cultural practice. And so the fact that the museum is a site of controversy is not an aberration. It's not the exception. It is the rule. And I've included in the email, this video is included, a couple examples. One is one took place in the late 1980s, controversy over Andres Serrano's infamous photograph, Piss Christ. I have an image of it attached. I also have an article or an essay or maybe a meditation, maybe the better better description of that situation that I published in a collection of essays a few years ago that I thought you might find of interest, and how this photograph, this highly charged photograph in which Serrano reveals his ambivalence toward Christianity, toward, say, an American cultural Christianity, towards the Catholic Church, that implied all kinds of social and political, had other social and political implications, all distilled in a beautiful, illuminating image, was picked up by the conservative right and used as an icon of the cultural wars, or for the cultural wars. And I encourage you to read that the meditation. Some of the things that Jesse Helms had to say, a Republican from North Carolina, who spearheaded this eruption in the late 80s in the cultural wars, related to defunding federal funding of the arts because artists were not making the kind of work that made America and American culture, defined by the right, glorified it enough, venerated enough. And then also more towards the end of the 90s, in 1999, Rudy Giuliani picked up on a painting by the British African artist Chris Ofili that featured a African Madonna that was installed on elephant dung, and that elephant dung was part of the composition, part of the materials used, and how that was perceived by first the Democratic Catholic League and then picked up by Rudy Giuliani in New York City. The exhibition that it took place in was called Sensations. It was an exhibition that kind of invited the criticism by had warnings to the audience that served both as a deterrent but also as an attractive come hither, like the sign that says, "Wet paint, don't touch," and your first urge is to touch that bench. But the descriptions of Ofili's work as the Madonna defaced with elephant dung was absolutely untrue. For Ofili, an artist of African descent, elephant dung was a source of strength, was a source of life, was something that was attached to a whole host of values that offered a unique African perspective on this Black Madonna, but that somehow she was being defaced with the use of alien materials according to Western European conventions. Became the source of controversy because it was addressed to critique of Christianity and unique American, distinctive American values. Although from the work by the Chapman brothers and from other works that were much more controversial from a vulgarity standpoint. And in fact, in Chris Ofili's Mary painting, he included collages of cutouts from pornographic magazines. But Giuliani or the Catholic League didn't address those, didn't address that vulgarity, didn't address the pornographic aspect, but addressed how it was sacrilegious and anti-religious. And both for Serrano and Ofili, who were accused of being anti-religious atheists, anti-Christian, anti-Western, threats to Western culture, all of which should give us pause given the fact that that is precisely the kind of language that's coming out of the White House coming out of the rise of white nationalism here in the United States and also in Europe. The fight against immigrants, the black and the brown people. And that should give us pause. But that both Ophelia and Cyrano, their ambivalence or the way they're approaching different ways of making sense of this cultural and religious heritage, for political polemics, for political discourse, the art's realm of ambivalence, of either or, of nuance, just has no room. And while the museum space operates as a public forum, the kind of discourse that takes place and how art is often appropriated for it often risks reducing the work to serve as an icon of veneration for a particular political viewpoint, which is destructive of art. So the challenge is that political discourse how in ways can works of art enhance it, nourish it, deepen it, make it more complex, offer different ways, offering ways to make it more nuanced, rather than serve as a weapon to bludgeon an opponent. That's the challenge in this political discourse, in the political space, the public space of the museum. How is it that as you write, as you teach, as you talk about works of art, that you do so mindful that you are taking place in the context of this messy, multifarious arguments about what it means to live in a just society, that the arts play a role in it, but what kind of role did the arts play in it? Did the arts serve just as icons of veneration or as tools of propaganda, or can the arts operate as ways of finding a glimmer of hope someplace else? Find a ways to look at issues differently. That's the truly, I think, humane, and potentially redemptive aspect of the arts. But it takes place in the context of shouting and fighting and messiness. Yet it's up to, I think, educators, teachers, curators, writers, to find ways to preserve what is best about the visual arts, most humane, redemptive, hopeful about the arts. That's the challenge, and it's not easy. I hope these thoughts are helpful to you. Have a good weekend. I will be writing you on Monday from New York City. I'll be spending a week in New York City teaching at King's College. Blessings to you this weekend. Take care.